in particular drifting or strolling, is already, but the speed culture of our time, kind of resistance. Very immediate method for unfolding stories. How wonderful. Not only that, but there's an article I read in the, I think in the Mayo Clinic newsletter years ago about, it was called lethal, no, it was in Scientific American, that's what it was. It was called, but it was from Mayo Clinic. It was called Lethal Chairs.
What was it
They had a whole thing about in meetings, in organizations, people should hold the meetings while walking together.
Oh, yes.
In classes, they should be standing up, speaking and listening. And so that they sit only a few hours a day instead of most of the day. And they're on their feet and walking more of the day, and they would then live longer and so on. It's a marvelous article.
Well, I think during the Zoom time, I'm not so sure that's happening. Oh.
Walking by Narmada. Yeah, that's another holy river in India, Narmada. Especially good lingams, that the stones get rolled there, and they have beautiful round stones in that river. I don't think I've ever been to that river. Narmada. May have been partially ruined by a dam.
Yes, that's right. It was a huge dam there.
Do we get started?
Sure, let's do that.
All right, I can stop sharing the screen, make sure everyone.
Oh, look at all those nice people. Is everybody from Maine? Down
No.
Mainers?
We have folks from all over
That's
registered.
great.
All right.
I have to visit them more.
Yes, you do.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the launch of Katarina Weslien's exquisite new book, Walking Kailash, an Invitational Project with Katarina Weslien and Robert Thurman. My name is Annika Early. I'm the Managing Director of Speedwell Projects. Speedwell is an artist-run nonprofit gallery that promotes and archives the work of women, gender fluid, and non-binary artists. Through exhibitions, residencies, and documentaries, we elevate the work of artists who have made a long-term commitment to their practice. I'd like to introduce you to our two speakers this evening, artist Katarina Weslien and Tibetan scholar Robert Thurman. Katarina Weslien is a multidisciplinary artist and educator. Her work takes form in cross-media installations, collaborative efforts, textile constructions, and print media. She builds her projects through layers of research with a particular interest in how images and objects elicit thoughts, emotions, and embodied knowledge. By investigating the possibilities of how different confluences of materials, people, events, and the environment reflect our interdependence, her work serves to reveal how meaning is embedded and exposed within the context of shifting sets of circumstances. Weslien received her BFA in textiles from Utah State University and her MFA from Cranbrook Academy of Art. She is the former editor of the Moth Press at the Maine College of Art, where she was also the director of graduate studies. Most recently, she has taught at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where she also co-led study trips to India that focus on material culture and pilgrimage studies. Her work has been exhibited internationally and recognized with awards from the National Endowments for the Arts, the Payson Foundation, and the Maine Arts Commission. Robert Thurman is a talented popularizer of the Buddha's teachings and the first Westerner Tibetan Buddhist monk ordained by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. A charismatic speaker and author of many books on Tibet, Buddhism, art, politics, and culture, Bob was named by the New York Times the leading American expert on Tibetan Buddhism and was awarded the prestigious Padma Shri Award in 2020 for his help in recovering India's ancient Buddhist heritage. Time magazine chose him as one of the 25 most influential Americans in 1997, describing him as a larger-than-life scholar activist destined to convey the Dharma, the precious teaching of the Shakyamuni Buddha, from Asia to America. He served as the J. Song Kappa Professor of Indo-Tibetan Buddhist Studies in the Department of Religion at Columbia University for 30 years, until 2020, and is the founder and active president of Tibet House US, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the preservation and promotion of Tibetan culture, and of the American Institute of Buddhist Studies, a nonprofit affiliated with the Center for Buddhist Studies at Columbia University and dedicated to the publication of translations of important artistic and scientific Tibetan treatises. Inspired by his longtime good friend, the Dalai Lama, Robert takes us along with him into an expanded vision of the world through the prism of Tibetan Buddhism. Thank you, Katarina and Robert, for joining us. Before we get started, we'll open the chat to questions towards the end of tonight's conversation. At that time, please submit your questions through the chat found at the bottom menu of your Zoom screen. If you'd like to purchase the book, you can visit us at speedwellprojects.com/shop or stop by the gallery Thursday through Saturday from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. Lastly, Katarina's stunning solo show, What Did You Smell When You Were Away, is on view at Speedwell until July 10th. And Katarina, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Annika, for that. And thank you, Bob, for being here. This is such a treat to see you and to have you here. And also thank you for the foreword you wrote to the book. That was based on a trip that we took in 2004. And so what I wanted to do was just to give a little background of the book before we start the conversation and the endless questions we have for Bob about Tibet, as he is the sort of the main teacher who can explain it in ways that can be understood. So I so much appreciate that. So back in 2004, my dear friend Allison Hildreth came into my studio and said, Bob is going to Kailash, we have to go. So we had traveled with him before in Ladakh and Dharamsala and knew what a really rich tradition that he holds and the knowledge he holds. And to go to Mount Kailash in Western Tibet was one of those trips you kind of do once in a lifetime, although you should be doing it 108 times, I think. But Mount Kailash, which we'll go into more when Bob and I had the conversation, but just to say briefly, it's a mountain sacred to both Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and that it's sort of thought of as the center of the world. And it's very high altitude. It's probably the hardest physical thing that I've ever done was to circumambulate this mountain. And I was really curious about going because I grew up as a Lutheran Swede, and any sense of a mythic landscape was just not present. And I have been traveling in India since the mid-70s when I was a UN volunteer in Iran and went overland through Afghanistan before the Russians and Pakistan and into India and up to Ladakh when it was just opened up and the first refugees were there from China. And so I started to see a culture that I didn't understand at all and knew that I really wanted to come back. And so I have been going back to India and Buddhist countries since then. So during the circumambulation, when you reach not the top, but the height of the peak of the circumambulation, there is a lake called Tara Lake. And there, like many pilgrims do, people collect water from there. And so it's a lake of compassion. And so you have compassion in a bottle. So after this pilgrimage, I went back to Maine and, time went by, but I started to really question what is compassion? How can compassion be contained? And where does it really exist? If I have it in a bottle, then how can it be experienced? So I had Julie Porches Santos came into the studio to interview me for something, but we ended up just talking about all this water I collected from everywhere. And she said, I think there's a project in here. And when I went out to Chicago to teach at the School of the Art Institute at the Fiber Material Studies Department, and the incredible faculty there were really welcoming, and especially Joan Livingstone, who basically, was a visiting artist. And she said, here's the studio, here's an assistant, what do you need? And so it took this time to really start to examine this water and to ask those questions about compassion and make work from that. But then took that further by expanding it and asked 20 artists, and also an anthropologist and a choreographer, to consider a walk of compassion wherever you are in the world. And so then the question comes, if we spend all this time and energy going to these sacred sites, is it possible to duplicate those sites in a way? Is it possible to transform? Can we do it at home? So that was really the question when I sent this invitation. And basically what it asked of all the participants was to consider this walk of compassion near a body of water and send back the water and anything along the way. And this notion of anything along the way is, be careful what you ask for. It became really this wonderful trove of research, art making, writing, and photos and videos and sound. And then Alan West, who is just the best studio assistant one could ask for, made an archive and helped me photograph and really organize it and built a website for it that then became this book, Walking Kailash. And the artists that are in this, I'm going to read this, but I just want to give you a brief synopsis of the people who are in it and just a real brief look into what they have done. And Alino Gallo imagined the safety of refugees crossing the ocean into Italy. Alison Hildreth discovered a spring used by settlers year back on Vinyl Haven. Julie Porcha Santos walked with the community to learn the history of place in the back cove in Portland. Nandita Raman followed a pilgrimage route along the sacred river of the Narmada in India. And Angela Ellsworth waited to be ready to walk in community in Phoenix, Arizona, the most unwalkable city in the US, she says. David Ross and Rebecca Duclos made order and beauty for a grieving friend in a house in France. And Joan Livingstone counted the steps from a tent to an initiation ground in Bodh Gaya. Catherine Trimble walked a circle in water with a blindfold. Gerhard Nodell followed a snake-like river hidden by the city of Pontiac, Michigan. And Jane Lackey resisted, protected, and protested for water in the high deserts of Nevada. Macy Craddock breathed the air of a threatened bog. Shoshana White paid attention to tremors and pulses coming from the ground on Mackworth Island. Tamar El-Or commemorated the redemption of a river in Tel Aviv. Daniel McCusker crossed the graveyard of history with compassion. Gordon Sasaki lowered a bag for collection in the East River on Mother's Day in New York City. And Ann Hamilton stopped to feel the torrential rain in Columbus, Ohio. Marina Miliu Theokaraki discovered a healing well under the Acropolis in Athens. Ernesto Pujol performed a walk of compassion with a grieving friend. And Barbara Launder followed a waterway used for thousands of years outside Halifax in Canada. And this then became the book that we're launching tonight. And so many friends and people have encouraged me because it's been a very slow book into coming. And I just want to thank a few people who have done that. And one is Joan Livingstone for her early support of this book, and Christine Cantwell for her early edits in a version of this book that was in the MIT journal, Performance Art Journal, and Anne Riesenberg for her really thoughtful listening and helping me clarify some ideas. And Elizabeth Zayu and Brian Dunn, who had been editors extraordinaire that really came in the last part of this project and really helped to clarify some of the ideas. And it goes without saying that book designer John Kramer has been a real support, the most patient man I know, and a rock to this project. So thank you for all that. And I know this is backwards, but here it is. So with that, Bob, I think we should go ahead and maybe go backwards now. Yes, that's you. Oh, I could have done that, so you could have seen it properly. So in this trip that we did back in 2004, and you had been there before,
Yes.
Maybe if you could talk a little bit about Kailash as this spiritual center for so many different religions, and why it's important for, this idea of pilgrimage. I mean, for Tibetans themselves, as we saw, and also for you personally.
Well, thank you, Katarina. I'll try to think of something. I was just, and thank you, Annika, for your production at Speedwell of the book and the project, the exhibition. And I'm very happy to talk to a number of pilgrims from Maine. So thank you all for being here. Well, Kailash was, as I wrote in the preface, Kailash was a very big turning point for me. I'd had a kind of taste of Kailash in literature, of course, Sanskrit literature, because it's considered in the Hindu Sanskrit literature to be the abode of Shiva, the sort of preferred abode of Shiva, and Uma, Mrs. Shiva. And it's sort of thought of as the kind of axial mountain, because I guess when you were in India and you looked up at the Himalayas, and then actually Kailash technically is trans-Himalayan. It's a part of a range that goes north from the Himalayan wall, which is extraordinary. If you've never been to India and you go in a plane toward Nepal or anywhere, Ladakh, or even west to Bhutan or Darjeeling, and you suddenly see the Indian plain is here, and then there's this giant wall that is the Himalayan wall. It's huge. It's because it's where the Indian tectonic plate goes under the Asian tectonic plate, and the Himalayas grow by a few inches actually every year. They go up higher and higher all the time because this slow movement of the tectonic plate of what's called the Indian one pushing it up. And so anyway, when they looked up there, they saw this extraordinary mountain, and it has this remarkable shape like a Shiva lingam, which is the holy object in a Shiva temple. And then there's a ring of mountains around it. There's a little one coming up toward it, and then there's a ring of mountains around it that are like the sort of pool when you pour milk on the lingam and so on, it goes into this pool. And the lingam, of course, represents Shiva's phallus, and the pool represents the yoni of the cosmic mother, sort of thing, in the Hindu thing. Buddhists have a different view about it, but anyway, it's considered the most holy mountain. And even in Indian temples all over India, Hindu temples, the sort of main temple, which usually will have a kind of like a rectangular but sloping in trapezoid type crowning thing over the central womb room, which, as it's called, where the central images are. And that's called the Kailash of the temple. So it's very, it has a general meaning of being like an axial mountain, and sort of like the axial pole from north to south pole in their older cosmology of the ancient India. And so it's a kind of pilgrimage summit or something to go to Kailash. So when I first went there, and I've been to a lot of other holy places, and I used to take people as groups, and I myself went there. The major Buddhist holy place is something called Bodh Gaya, which is near the city of Gaya in the plains in India. And I've been there many times, and I've been to Western pilgrimage places, and they're all have usually a strong vibration of Jerusalem, for example. So, and but I always was a little being brought up in our modern culture, which is to say, alienated from nature in general. We're taught to be, in fact. And also, I happen to be born in Manhattan Island, and I spent most of my youth there. And that's kind of a concrete place apart from nature also in a funny way. So I was a little cynical about all those things. And I thought, well, okay, it's a great pilgrimage place, really not fun. We're all going to go there. But basically, we're bringing the holiness, it's our faith, our attitude, our whatever it is. But then that mountain somehow had this impact on me. I don't know why, really, but it really impressed me with its living quality. And there's a Buddhist tradition that there's a particular Buddha divinity form called Chakrasambhara, which means something like the machine of super bliss, Shambhara, the best bliss. And so the idea of a Buddha being as a being that radiates bliss, throughout the universe. And that's a particular mountain. And it's said that the mandala of that deity is always open. The Hindu thing about Shiva, they don't say that. They just say he likes to be there. But the Buddhist thing is that the mountain itself and its surround is like is a living mandala. That is to say, you enter it and you enter the sphere or the home of that divine Buddha form. And it doesn't mean that Buddha doesn't, when you say deity, by the way, in the Buddhist term, it doesn't mean an omnipotent creator, because the Buddhists didn't think there was such a thing. On the other hand, the Buddhists were not atheists, because they did believe there were deities in the universe. And then Buddhas themselves will adopt a form of deities in particular contexts. But even then, they're very insistent that they're not omnipotent. They didn't create it. And there's a wonderful conversation between the going creator deity in India at that time, named Brahma, in Buddha's time, before Shiva and Vishnu were well known at all. And Brahma said to Buddha, look, please tell being, I want you to teach, because Buddha was saying, I don't want to teach because nobody will understand the amazingness of nature that I have come to realize, the amazingness of reality. And the Buddha says, then Brahma said, no, I want you to teach. I'm going to help you teach, and I want you to teach, because I want you to tell human beings that I'm not omnipotent and I didn't create the world. I'm just the most powerful being in this particular cycle of this world, Brahma, because I had good karma from previous universes that I lived in. And I do my very best for all beings. I'm really nice, Brahma. But when bad things, and then they worship me when they're well off and they're happy. They think, oh, God is great, wonderful. And they're happy. And I must admit, my vanity, I don't mind being worshipped in that context. But on the other hand, a lot of terrible things happen to them. And their children die, and they die, and the parents die, everybody dies. And it's just really scary for them. And when bad things happen to them, they blame me. But I didn't do it. I want you to tell them that we're all in the world together, and we all create it all the time, the way we see it and the way we act and what we think. But no one of us totally creates it, but we all intercreate it, something like that. So please tell beings that, not to be mad at me when they have trouble. And they can call on me, I'll try to help if I can, but I often can't. So I think that's charming myself. I love it very much. I particularly like to tell the story of giving a lecture in a place like Arkansas or Oklahoma or somewhere. And then when I tell that story, I pause and I can feel in the audience they're waiting for a crack of lightning to strike me down. And when it doesn't come, there's a palpable feeling of relaxation in the audience. I can't explain it, but it's a little tip I do. So Kailash, what it did was it broke through my Occidental, my modern materialist culture. I mean, I already had the idea I was trying to be spiritual, but on the other hand, there are all these you drag along all these habitual things carved into your unconscious or your subliminal, let's just call it. And the idea that nature is just sort of a neutral thing out there that we walk around on is still part of our culture. That's why we're wrecking the whole thing, because we think somehow we don't need it, or somebody's going to make a better one. Jeff Bezos will invite us to his space station, gigantic, or we can go to Mars and eat potatoes with Matt Damon. That's what we all imagine. So we still have that, but Kailash broke it. And the way it did it was the night I first was there, and I was in a very bad mood because I was at 16,000 plus feet. This was 10 years or 9 years before we went, Katarina, first trip I went. And it's almost 17,000 feet, the base of it, where you start the circumambulation, a town called Darchen. And then the communists make you camp in a terrible place, all filled with broken glass and dog poo and barking dogs. You can't go out by the streams where the Tibetans are camping in their tents with a nice kind of cozy tents and a neighborhood, kind of the pilgrims' neighborhood that they created. They won't let you go there. And you have to camp in this other place and on little concrete tent platforms amidst all this garbage, So I thought, oh, this is really a horrible place like every other one, but, we'll make the best of it. So then I go there, I'm sleeping, trying to sleep. Also, it's super cold when the sun goes down. This particular first trip of mine was October, and you're really lucky, Katarina, you weren't there in October, believe me. We went in June or July, as I recall. But in October, when the sun goes down, wham, the temperature just shoots down with the sun, and you get down to 0 and less than 0. And it was reasonable, like 40, 50, 60 in the day with the sun up. And you just dive into your mummy bag in your tent, and you cover yourself with blankets and many things. Things come over your head, and you really freaked out. We had nice porters who make hot water bottles, actually. So you take that in there with you. So I was in there, and then I'm trying to fall asleep. And suddenly there's a light shining through the floor of the tent and through my mummy bag. And I didn't have a battery thing on me or anything. And the light was coming from the ground, I swear. And then of course, I didn't believe it. So I jumped out and had to unravel myself out of my cocoon and look and see if somebody was shining lights on my tent, which it wouldn't have come from the ground anyway, even if they were. But anyway, that's what I was then thinking. And there was nobody. Everybody had completely passed out, and they were also buried deep in their cocoons because of the extreme cold. And I went back in, and it was still there. And I couldn't even sleep, but I felt like I was floating on a sea of light coming through the ground. So I was saying, all right, I surrender. Mount Kailash, you have me nailed. There's something else here that really is a mandala. It really is something. The earth can shine even through layers of concrete, canvas, down pillows, down mummy bag, everything zipped over your head. The earth can actually shine light, like something not supposed to be allowed to happen according to our materialist worldview, right? And I couldn't sleep, and I tried to wake everybody up at 4 a.m. to get out and get started. I was so energized. And they were like, huh? Shut up. We're sleeping as long as we can till the sun comes up. So anyway, and after the whole experience there, and then I was back after that 5 more times, one of the times with Katarina. And every time I had some kind of amazing experience like that. So to me, it was where I finally broke through something about my, WASP, New York upbringing, karma of my physical family, and of the separation from nature, that nature is just inert matter, and it's just something there. And I really recognized the aliveness of the earth, and the aliveness of the stone, and of the water, and of the wind, and of the fire or the temperature, and it's all part of us, and we're part of it, of course. And even people who know that, so-called mystical experience, like an enlightened being, like a Buddha, that actually a Buddha is defined as someone who expands their sense of identification, right? When you're in love with someone, or it could be, it doesn't have to be romantic, it could be your child or, some dear person, you identify with them, and you feel you're kind of part of them, they're part of you to varying degrees in various moods. But if something hurts them, you really take it personally, and you practically feel it yourself. And so that's a great human ability to identify, and people on teams, they identify with the teammate. Even people in war, in platoons, they identify with the platoon mate, and they go crazy, when the enemy kills one, then they go out and kill everybody and so on. So that's a human ability to do that. And a Buddha is defined as someone who has cultivated that ability to such an extent that they identify with all life, and they have an experience as if they are everything. And of course, they only do it when they see everything as good, actually. They couldn't do it if they were still miserable and clinging onto their boundary and like worrying about other as potentially harmful, the way we normally are, dangerous, harmful, even micro other, the virus, or whatever it is. But Buddha is technically defined as a being that has become like that. And therefore, although Buddha has always declared, the Buddhas all proclaim non-omnipotence, they do claim extreme knowledge and extreme competence in trying to help other beings discover their own true nature. And everyone has that kind of a nature of feeling a loving interconnectedness with everything. And out of that kind of nature, to a lesser degree than the sort of extreme thing of a Buddha, then, human beings, many different kinds, at some different moments, even the most brainwashed one who feels very alienated, but still they have moments of feeling connected to nature, connected to each other. I mean, we only propagate by feeling connected to at least one other, at least for a brief moment. That's how the door opens and we have to pay their school fees for 25 years and whatever it may be, So Kailash, I'm saying like this, Kailash opened me to the aliveness of what's around us, and that really we should be pilgrimaging our way through life, not just some special place. And so therefore, when Katarina and colleagues conceived the idea of doing a book of walking Kailash in Milwaukee, Underground River in Wisconsin, or whatever, in Tel Aviv, whatever it is, that seems so wonderful to me, so much in that spirit, that I tried to write a little bit. I told the story in the preface anyway, which I just told you. And I think it's a wonderful project, and it couldn't be more on time right now, because what do we have? The minute I retired from Columbia University, I know I'm talking a little long, Katrina, but then
no, it's fine. Please go ahead.
But let me just finish this. The minute I retired in 2019, after 31 years, I went to Al Gore's Climate Reality Project Leadership Training Weekend Seminar, and I got his slides, and I got the message and how to give the message and the whole thing. And it really motivates you when you really get that information. You really visually see it, plus all the level of current disasters that are going on every minute. If you look at it in a global way, it isn't just the summer that California burns; it's other seasons, other places are burning, and that's unbelievable. What's going on, right? I mean, we're in the midst of a super crisis, and only Greta really tells it like it is, actually, really, in the radical way. She's like a medium, like an oracle who tells us, and we're not listening still. So anyway, but the one thing that Al Gore doesn't do, because he doesn't know how, and all the mostly scientific-oriented people don't know how, and I'm not sure I know how, but I thought I could try, but I haven't really done it properly yet. And that is change our worldview enough to give us a motivation to treat our planet as if it was a holy thing. It itself is a holy thing. And it is not only holy, but practically it is our home. And without it, we're totally fried. I don't care how many 100 billion you might have as the head of some big internet corporation. You build a space station, potatoes on Mars with Matt Damon and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't think so. And this is it. And we are not acting, we don't have the motivation to treat it like the crisis that it is. We tolerate governments and people in power who act like after, they always say something like, we'll be fine by 2060, we'll be there. And being leaders, they're older and they're definitely counting on being dead in 2060. So it's meaningless, those fake promises, Meanwhile, they could turn a bunch of switches now. And if the mass people were more motivated and had more true picture of what it is, they would be willing to hold a little water from a well and have a little less electricity and do a little something, rather than continue with this absolutely accelerating wreckage that is taking place around us. So in the midst of that, a little drop of compassion, a little drop of water of compassion, from the Walking Kailash Project, it's just welcome. And I congratulate you, Katarina and co. And I thank you. Okay, so then that's my spiel, basically. I mean, that's stuff for starters, but I'm happy to also dialogue on any question. Yes, Katarina.
So you partially answered that question, but I think it's wonderful. Well, because I'm thinking with so many of these walks, that, the larger question for me is, do you, especially when you speak of this aliveness that you had when you visited Kailash, that it's actually in the place. And, can that place be duplicated or condensed in some way? That, I know that Diana Eck talks about that as far as in Hindu religion, that you go to one temple. If you can't do the yantra in this one place, you can go, that will take 8 days. You can go to a temple and it'll only take you 1 day, or if you can't go to that one, you go to something else. Even though there are Mount Kailashes that are duplicated in temples that are not the mountain itself. And I guess what I'm curious, because I think you've been very positive about these walks, of course, as have I, but do you really believe that it can be that somehow this thing you described that was so powerful in the night, that, I take as as the mountain or the energy around that place, that must have been in more people feeling that, as it has been so holy for so many people. But can one take that away in the form of that water, or and put the intention into so many of these really beautiful walks? And can it be translated in that way, or is it just what we do
Sure.
in our own thinking?
Sure it can, after all, water, they are saying, and they rightly, that there are going to be water wars. People talk about
Pretty
Syria and the insane Assad family, how he destroyed his entire nation in order to maintain ownership of a destroyed thing and people. But actually what nobody mentions in the media when they tell you about that is they had a 6 or 7 year drought before that happened that was the worst in their recorded history. And thousands and tens of thousands of farmers couldn't grow anything, and they had to go to the city, and they started demanding social services from that dictatorship. And then instead of social services, they got bullets in the street. And then the whole thing started from there, And that's just the beginning of that country. Many others are going to have experienced this kind of thing. So the point is that in that esoteric teaching that is associated for Tibetan Buddhists with Mount Kailash, water itself is a goddess. It is and when I say goddess again, I mean a Buddha goddess, a female Buddha in the form of a goddess. Her name is Mamaki, and she's associated with immeasurable compassion. And the earth itself is the Buddha Lochana, which means the Buddha eye, which is a kind of awareness, sensitive awareness, like an eye that sees in all directions simultaneously. And she makes this solid place. And what is the value and virtue of a solid place? And solidity in our bodies, and solidity around us. It enables us as individual sentient beings to touch each other and to reach out to each other. Yogis can enter altered states of mind where they don't have a sense of having a body, and they even feel sort of vast and it's all one. And I call it the cheap oneness. Mystic oneness is the cheap one, because nobody's there. So you're one with everyone, but nobody's there. Then you don't feel selfish and guilty because you're not there either. But you somehow entered such a space, and then you think, then later you come back and think, well, I understood oneness once, and then you just behave like you're upper caste, or you behave separated from other people in your relative world, and you figure you go back there after death. A lot of the so-called enlightenments are very much escapist. They're modeled on the fact that maybe you can get away from everything and you can find an absolute apart from everything. Even a form of Buddhism is like that. But actually, according to Buddha's view, and which I have come to agree with, but I don't have his direct experience of it to his degree, and that is that we are here, and our human form we have evolved not because we were aggressive and mighty hunters. That's the biggest load. We were scared witless is why we're here. We got to be human because we wanted a form of life where we could interact with each other, where we could talk. And you know why we can talk? Because we didn't eat each other the minute we met. So we hung out and chatted, and we learned to speak. the animals that don't speak, they are living in what the Buddhists call one eating another realm, different evolutionary niches where you pounce on something or it pounces on you. So no time for conversation. Human being, we endlessly chat with each other, and we can hear the chat from thousands of years ago in some text or something. And we therefore, of course, we've become very powerful by joining our intelligences through literature and language. And we can be more nasty than any being. We can blow up the whole planet with nuclear bombs, but we don't want to. And we have more fun than other beings when we're in a good mood. And we have a lot, we evolved to here by being more open and sensitive in regard. We're much more open than a crocodile. We're much more open than a rhinoceros or something. And we forego the thick skin and the scales and the big jaw, and we forwent that because we finally got sick of crocodile lovemaking, which was sort of chalk on a blackboard, wouldn't you say? Think of a crocodile caress. Horrible. Human beings, we can pat each other on the cheek, soft cheek, soft fingertail. So we're sort of softies, actually, all of us. And therefore, we have this wonderful ability to identify and empathize with each other. And therefore, we're the best platform to become Buddhas, actually, to become fully enlightened, where we won't be so scared of everybody else because we understand the nature of things. Even we discover that death is not such a big issue. In fact, well, it is, of course, a big issue, but we discover that death is continuing life. And the actual moment of death is the time when we encounter our biggest encounter of life force. And if we're not prepared, of course, we shrink from it and we try to reconstruct some kind of a boundaried creature that we will be in an ensuing life. And don't tell me that's a sort of superstitious, weird thing, because there's a lot of evidence for that. And the scientists who claim, and most of us half believe that because we're brought up like that we become nothing at death, that is a slight piece of insanity. If that's what you think, it means you think really that you're nothing now, and therefore you might be depressed when you had a moment of quiet, because whatever you've done in your life is all meaningless in the long run. But that's supposed to be a big thing for scientists, but it's just false. And furthermore, just ask any scientist, which one of them discovered nothing? In which you go, which one of them proved and verified it by experimental evidence that anything can become nothing? Obviously, not only did no one ever discover that, no one ever will discover that. Because guess what? Nothing is nothing. I love that. It really took me years to figure out how to deal with scientists, my natural science colleagues, with that one. They get really irritated. Well, it's obvious, because, when we go and look for something, we don't find it. We say, well, there was nothing there. We say that. But that doesn't mean we found nothing there. It just means we didn't find what we were looking for. The point about nothing is that there's no nothing there because there's no there in nothing. So nobody's going to go to nothing. Nothing. They have their own law of thermodynamics. No energy ever is destroyed, just changes form. So my point I forgot what my point is, actually. I did, because I enjoy that very much. But my point is that, you mentioned about a bottle of water, but the whole human being is nothing but a bottle of water. And if water is associated with compassion, you wash people in water, you have to drink water, you clean a wound with water, there's so many things you do with water. There's no life without water. And we are a bottle of water, and we are very compassionate, actually, because we empathize with each other. We try to block it, of course. People will come up with theories that you'll get compassion fatigue, you'll get all burned out if you even get associated, you get acculturated to ward off feeling. Doctors, for example, I think that's why they go through the 36-hour residency shifts, to get so exhausted with the patient that they then sort of wall them off so they can be objective about everything like that. They wouldn't be doctors if they didn't have a wish to make people feel better. That's their original motive. But that gets kind of beat out of them as part of the sort of militaristic idea about how you're supposed to be trained. So The thing is, I do think so, my dear Katarina, that you can bring a drop of water. But on the other hand, of course, it's like you don't want to think that only that water in that lake is compassion.
Right.
That's particularly in that sort of spiritual thing. There's a special blessing in it, of course, and it's infused from all directions. And if you get past the sort of the refusal to acknowledge the possibility of miracles, if you insist on staying in a world that you think somebody has said that it's all material and there's no miracles, then then it's hard to imagine. But that's a crazy way to be. Reality is infinite. It's filled with infinite surprises. Our every day is actually a miracle. That we can draw a breath, it's a miracle. Human body is a miracle. Anybody who really analyzes it realizes it's really. I remember Carl Sagan, beloved Carl Sagan, who I love. I don't care, he's a materialist. Although I used to use him to tease people. I say, did Carl Sagan show up and say, it's cool, guys, I don't exist. So you're really going to be nothing at death, so you don't have to be scared about worrying about future life. But of course not, But they get more mad when I do that. But I'm just saying, he used to do his cosmic calendar. Some of you who are a little older will remember his cosmos thing. And he would walk along this calendar. And then the human being would be at 11:59 and 10 seconds. And then there finally were human beings. In the legend, they have up from Precambrian slime, because they have this legend because they think there was no other planet in the universe with other humans. They live in a very lonely universe. A little rock we're here, tiny little film of atmosphere, just the right distance from sun, and just amazingly moon and sun look the same size, but gee whiz, they're much different. We discovered that, we're so smart, and we're on this little thing, and we're the only ones in the whole universe. And we send out Beatle music and Schubert and Mozart, hoping that to get back, someone else will say, let it be, let it be. The Beatles on the planet in Alpha Centauri, maybe somebody else will send one. We're hoping desperately because we're so lonely here, I mean, it's just completely silly, these ideas. There's a trillion planets. And besides which, just because you can't see a star past a certain thing because of the light shift, red shift, and the speed of light and all that, doesn't mean there aren't more stars out there beyond the long, dark thing. Totally. All of these ideas that we have imported from our human alienation and sensitivity, that if this was really an infinite universe,
Oops, we lost Bob. Hello. I think.
Looks like we have some internet issues. Oh,
Yes.
no.
Whoops. Oh, no. You went into space. All right, maybe he'll come back on. Yeah, he seems to be on here. But what time is it, Annika?
It's almost 7 o'clock. It's 6:54.
Okay, so maybe will you go into to see if he arrives back in?
Yep.
Okay. In the meantime, I think if anyone has any questions, I don't know if you how do you want to handle that? Do people speak or will people write them? How do you want to work that?
I think I would prefer, just so that I can make sure I can see everybody. If anyone has any questions, please type them into the chat and I will read them out. And Katarina, you can answer them. And hopefully Robert will be able to join back in.
It was very. So let's see. Okay. It's so odd. Everyone is totally muted here. I'm a little bit worried what happened. He was on such a roll.
I know.
But I guess my next question for him, maybe I'll just talk a little bit until we have some questions. Can you show us a few page. Oh, hi, Rebecca. How are you? Nice to see you. Can we show some pages from the book?
Yeah.
Yes.
We also did just get a question. Lisa Hunter asks, how do you compare and contrast the making of this book with your studio practice of making objects?
Oh, that is a very big and good question. For me, I am a relational person. I make work usually, I don't go into the studio to make an object. I usually I'm out in the world with, beings, non-beings, through travel, or I come across something that I bring back into my studio, and that I'm very slow in making. Things really need to just churn, sometimes for years, as in this project. This was up to 18 years ago that we went to Kailash, and now it's just a book, and it's been many other things along the way. But I have tried many different ways of making. And for me, I realized that my studio practice is one that I like to see, feel, be in contact with others and other places in order to try to understand something. And then I might make something that doesn't look like where I've been, but has something to do with that. So in one way, it's not, it is very different, but I need both. I need that sort of solitude of working things out, and then I need that full blown in community. And I think it has been, for me, when I think back of it, there's always been this side project that involves other people. And so this isn't the first one. This project really developed, and I think also working with John Kramer, the designer. He put his heart and soul into this, and we worked together. It took a long time, and then I changed my mind, and then I had another idea, but I think through the time that it took, it really it feels much better. So that doesn't really answer the question. I do both, but I need to have the sort of the community and the isolation. But let me just maybe explain the book a little bit, how we thought of it. The cover. Oh, there you are, Bob. What happened?
Well, I'm in the mountains here, and then if it's windy or something, sometimes you lose internet for a short second. Time Warner cable or something, but luckily it came back on. But anyway, please continue. Please continue. I was talking too much anyway.
No, you were not at all. No, not at all. I'm very excited. No, I was just saying, a few questions have come in, and I was just going to talk a little bit about how the book is laid out. And that if you turn on the inside here, this folder here, so this is everyone's water from the trip that they sent back. And then on the outside is everyone, there's an image from the walk itself. And then here is it's an embroidery of a microscopic image that I took from the original collection. And then each person has let me just get to a person. First person is, so here actually, I'll show you this. This is what I put a label on everyone's collection site. And so this is who it is, where they took it, what time, and so on. And that's what I use to get the microscopic images. And then here is an image of some of the collections that were in the studio while we were archiving them. And then each artist has this is Shoshana White's, it has her image, the microscopic image of where she collected the water. And then each person had their own story. So this is pictures that were taken by Tony Halbert of her walk on Mackworth Island, where she started off with glacier ice from Alaska and merged that ice with water from Mackworth. And as she walked, it melted. And so she has pictures of how it is.
Awesome.
This is slides. But then she has this I'll show this one and we'll get back to it here. These photograms done with a camera-less print, and one, oops, that's the wrong one there. So one is the glacier ice on here, and this is when it's melted with the Mackworth ice. So each person really has their story. So Ernesto Pujol's story about walking a walk of compassion with a grieving friend. So that's a little bit answering your question, Rebecca. Does anyone, are there more questions in here, Annika?
Yes. Carol Zahner asks, Katarina, has this work inspired you in other ways further?
Well, yes, I have. I mean, I have taken many aspects of this trip and looked at it in sort of different ways. I think coming together in this community of a book and also reaching out to, to Bob to have this conversation, to dare to have the conversation, which sort of leads me to my next question about, I'm not a Tibetan scholar, obviously. I'm an artist. I live in the world where I think where teachings, especially from the Buddhist side of our worldview, is really important to me, and has been for a really long time. So I'm really inspired by this community of refugees now in India that worked so hard and were treated so poorly, and have come to this, that this book is actually dedicated to the Nuns Project that we actually went to, Bob, when we were in Dharamsala together in the 90s. I can't remember exactly when. Yeah. And the nuns were just coming over, and they were beaten and raped, and they had horrible stories, but they just wanted to get to Dharamsala. They wanted to get out of China. Right. And now this Nuns Project, and you know more about this than I do, but I was so inspired by these women that I went back about 3 years ago with some friends, and now there are no more, very few nuns are crossing over to Nepal from China. But what this Nuns Project is doing now is that they are supporting women in the mountains in India who are of many different Buddhist faiths. And so the Nuns Project is supporting many nunneries there, and I'm involved with that. Yeah. So I think that's how that's really, it's really inspired me to support it in some way.
Sure, that's carrying water to them. That's really nice.
Yeah, support. Well, you know that project well, Bob.
Yes,
I think it's His Holiness's sister-in-law that started the Nuns Project and the Women's Association in Dharamsala.
Yes, they're very active and they're really good. And the other thing is that in Buddhism, the nuns are sort of lower status than the monks. The lay people's minds, and they don't support them as well, and it's harder for them to get sort of advanced degrees in their studies and things. But now that's changed, and they are starting to get Geshe degrees, what is called Geshe degrees, and being teachers, independent teachers themselves. So that there's a kind of breakthrough there. Yeah. In Tibetan Buddhism, and actually the Dalai Lama has failed to get the Thai Buddhists, the Sri Lankan Buddhists, the Burmese, etc., to really give proper status to the nuns. It's been a general problem throughout Buddhism. In fact, male chauvinism has been a planetary problem for a couple of thousand years. Yeah. But they're working on it.
Yeah.
And this is really nice. I really think, I was thinking when the power was out temporarily there, I was thinking that your Walking Kailash project, it is the artists who are the ones who can step up in this time and figure out how to help people shift their motivation, where they will really feel motivated to demand that the governments really take emergency measures, like Greta Thunberg does, right? She's that little girl. People can say Asperger's, or they can put any name they like. That's just a weird name, Asperger. some weird Nazi scientist actually who was doing weird experiments on children. But she simply became aware of this one thing, that the world is in danger, life is in danger on Earth, the sixth extinction of all the animals and insects and things. And everybody's acting like it's just normal, everything's going on as normal around her in Sweden, you know. And so she just had to Skålsträck för klimatet. No, I don't know Swedish, but it's so.
Skålstrejk för klimatet.
Skålstrejk för klimatet. And this little girl would go and sit in front of the parliament with that little sign, and maybe read a book or something and just sit there. And she was able to express this at the UN and the IMF and Davos. But the people who hear, and I think when they hear it, all those sort of quote unquote leaders, it really gets to them because they can't say that this woman is too aggressive. They can say, well, she's a monomaniacal or something. But it's such a vulnerable, gentle person, really, and a completely harmless in a way person. And yet she will not let go of their responsibility and the fact of the crisis, you know, and that nobody's treating it like a crisis, really, still, you know. And like even Joe Biden, it's like, oh, Green New Deal, that's too extreme, you know, that's too liberal or something, you know. And but we're doing something though. Listen, I'm delighted what he is doing. I'm really, really delighted. So, with.
Well,
Oh no.
oh no. Electricity here. Should we go to another question here?
Yeah, we have several questions coming in. Lillian Woolley and Hooker ask, what was it like to receive the samples from the other participants? Were there any surprises or unexpected submissions?
Oh, absolutely. Almost every single one. I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I expected water because that was, I mean, I just asked for that. But I guess the surprising part were the sound recordings, the images, the research, and how seriously people took this. I mean, I think thinking of compassion in terms of, compassion for oneself, compassion for other, compassion for the environment. It felt like people really thought in such, sensitive ways. And I guess the question that I had for what Bob started talking about, Greta Thunberg, is, with there's so much happening in the world at the moment, what are these acts that we do? What meaning do they have? I mean, we certainly felt it, many of us this summer, do we go out in the street? But what if we're compromised and we can't do these acts? And I think what I said in my afterword is that these are not overt political actions, but they feel political because of their intention, and they're paying attention to nuance and especially to the environment. There were so many walks that did that. For instance, I think of Gerhard Nodell, who in Pontiac, I can't remember the year, but it's called a city of rivers. And the founding, not the founding father, but some mayor or some politician decided it's too messy to have all this water. We'll just cement over it. And so he excavated where the water was there, which I thought was such a wonderful thing. And he was going to do a project with the city, but then COVID came and nothing really came of that. And then David Ross and Rebecca Duclos, was a really very intimate exchange of two letters between a really dear friend and a place. And it felt as if the place was a compassionate way of caretaking for their friend that had lost her partner. So they were intimate. And then, you have, Julie Porcher Santos, who, brought on a really cold day, brought out so many people to the back cove and to walk together as she does in her walks, for people to learn from each other the histories that they might know of a place. So, I can go on and on, but I think every single person surprised me. Alison Hildreth, she found this really beautiful spring on her property on Vinalhaven. and, you know, made this beautiful drawing of that. So, and also wrote about that. So I am feeling like I'm talking to myself here because I can't see anyone.
Here, I can pin myself maybe if that helps.
Okay, all right. Somebody else to see here.
Yeah, there's so much tenderness in this project. Everyone brought so much tenderness to their work and the things that they sent to you. And Jocelyn's question actually leads into this a little bit. Jocelyn asks, how do you see personal spiritual pursuits intersecting with your personal art practice? Is this a common thread, or do you feel like your show at Speedwell is unique in this way? Or another way of saying it, does your personal art practice reflect your personal spiritual practice? Or how do you see that overlapping going forward?
Oh, spirituality is such a taboo word in the art community. We don't often talk about it. But I think for me, my intimate practice, I mean, I've been been meditating for when I was in a monastery in Thailand in the early 80s, when I first encountered Buddhism, Vipassana. And what I really learned from that is really this notion of interconnectedness, that we are not these isolated beings, and that I'm brought up with that. Coming to America also, it's really about the individual, when in fact all we have to do is look at nature, and we realize that we cannot survive without interconnection, without other people, without the environment, what Bob was referring to. And so it's always there in my work, but I'm very reluctant to probably talk about it, because it becomes, I don't want to be judged for that part of myself. I put work out in the world, and, in the end, you just have to step away from it anyway. You can't be there defending it. It is what it is, no matter what your intention is. But I feel like this show at Speedwell, it brings together, I've been working on 3 projects for the last 18 years. Well, the Kailash project, 8 years, the jacquard weavings, the Kailash project, 18 years, and then 8 years, and the other parts, 5 years. And I've used this metaphor before. I feel like there are 3 trains that are all of a sudden coming to the same platform and then getting off at Speedwell, and we're all kind of looking at each other. And they appear to be different when in fact there's always this mediation of making and materiality in the work that is not just me. It's not about an expression of me, but it's about an exchange with something else, someone else, or place. So in that way, I hope that answers your question, Jocelyn. I think we lost Bob for good.
Yeah. Arifa had a question for Bob. I'm so sorry we can't ask it. Yeah.
Well, he might show up again.
I'll keep an eye out. Here's another question from Julie. I recently heard someone describe migrating peoples as the professors of place, in that moving through a landscape one learns and thus has information to share. I'm curious about the relationship between mobility and being rooted to place in your work, your history of travel, walking with nomads in Afghanistan, and how it connects to your material practice that unfolds in the studio.
Well, it's that whole thing, and you and I have talked about that, Julie, and is that I think when one is in motion, if I'm going to understand anything, I cannot go into the studio and just sit down and expect that to happen. It has to happen in motion. I think a lot of writers, a lot of artists, talk about this. And I think what I've learned, especially from when I lived in Iran for those 2 years, before graduate school, and joined the Kurdish migration, and just being elsewhere, actually being in India, is that it's this notion of Jagat, it's called, and it's an Indian concept that you see the potential in everything around you. And I think as migrating people, or people that are not so financially cushy or have everything and don't really have to try, there's much to be learned about making something, not from nothing, but from just transformation of the ordinary. to function on many different levels. And I think that happens a lot in my installation work way back when. That was certainly something I looked at. I liked looking at something that was familiar, mundane, and then how to transform that into an experience that was much larger than the assumption of what those things were or are. So it's that you don't really take anything for granted. And, you know, the moment you don't have something, you know, I think you start seeing the potential in everything in a way that, oh, this doesn't work. Oh, I'll just get another one from Amazon. You know, I think we become dumb to our world around us when it's all too convenient and when we have too much.
How does language play into it for you? I mean, I know there's like, you know, with travel, I don't know. I'm just thinking about like, maybe that was a half-baked question on my end.
No, but I mean, when I came to the US, I didn't have language. And I always attribute that to somehow being an artist. That, I mean, I had to figure out, I had to listen and look and feel in a way, because I had to try to understand people when I didn't understand what they were saying. And traveling is the same way. When I lived in Iran for those 2 years, I mean, I learned a language and I was fluent in Farsi when I left, but in the beginning I didn't know. So you just have to figure out, and I can be an extrovert. So that makes it somewhat easy and I'm comfortable. So you just figure out ways to talk, but that's not unlike in making art. You have to think of material as language. And you can't make assumption about materials that we put together, whether you're drawing, photographing, or weaving, or crocheting, or making sculpture. Each material has a history and it has a language, and it's not unlike the different languages and maybe different accents that we have. But I've heard my say in that video that we did, that I don't trust language always. I think because I've traveled in so many countries where they don't speak English, I'm slow to come to things. And I've come to appreciate that. I haven't always appreciated it.
All right. Does anyone have any other questions for Katarina? I will also repeat again that this book is for sale on our website, and also you can come in and buy it at the gallery as well. I'm going to type in the link.
Well, thank you all for coming. And can you just unmute yourself so I can at least hear somebody's voice? Can you do that, Annika? Can you unmute everyone?
Yes.
Oh,
Hi there.
So exciting.
Nice.
Beautiful.
Oh, that's so great to see you.
Fantastic talk, Katarina.
Great talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations, Katarina.
Thank God, not me.
Oh, so great. Oh, James Baker. Hi, James Baker. All right. Thank you so much. And I'll get back to Bob and pass on that. Yeah, I don't know what to say.
We do have one last question,
okay.
Katarina, from Julie. So exciting. Where does it go from here?
Where does it go from here? Well, I'm looking for this is sort of one of the silver linings of COVID. We have a long exhibition until July 10th. And I'm enjoying not rushing in to figure things out. There are more conversations. I've really enjoyed doing these small conversations that people sign up for in the gallery. It's, usually you have a big opening and then after that is boom, it's gone. You don't remember a thing anybody said. But these are intimate and I've found them really, really interesting. So I know that's not the question. But that is as far as I'm thinking until July 10th. And then I think there is a summer here somewhere. So.
Yeah.
And those gallery talks, we are adding 2 more dates in June, and they will be sent out. The link and the dates will be sent out through MailChimp and announced on our social media. And they've been really popular, so we might have to talk about adding more, Katarina, but we don't have to.
All right. But also there is one thing there. I am sponsoring a nun since she was 9 years old in Spiti Valley. When things shift, I would like to, I've not been to that part of India, to the mountain on that side. So I'd like to go there, not for a project, just to go. Who knows what happens? Oh, there's John and Danny. Hi there. All right. Any more questions? Well, there's Shoshana and Tony too. Hi there. So, and Jesse and Stephanie, hey.
Good.
Like family home week here. And David K, my goodness. Blast from the past. All right. Anything else, Annika? Or
Nope, no other questions so far. Last call for questions.
Good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
Hey,
Thank you.
Jane, they're coming to me.
Inspiring. Really inspiring.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, Wooly and Lily.
Hello.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Uh,
Bye.
Thank you, Carol. And Arifa.
Hi, dear.
Oh, Lauren. Oh, my goodness. Darnie. Hey. And Juliet. Oh, my God. And Catherine. Hey, how are you?